Today, our guest is award-winning photographer Catherine Hall. We're going to be recording this presentation, and it's going to be posted on the @Google YouTube channel. So when we get to the Q&A section, there's a microphone on the right, and make use of that so that we can get that in the recording.
I have some questions.
Now, about Catherine. Catherine has many accomplishments to her credit. She's a photographer, instructor, mentor. She has her own weekly photography show, and many, many more accolades. I was fortunate enough to meet Catherine about 9 months ago. She was hosting a photo walk in San Francisco. And what really impressed me about Catherine the first time that I met her was her dedication to make sure that everybody walked away with having experienced something new, having learned something new from this experience. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Catherine Hall.
Thanks, Ricardo, and I'm so honored to be here. Thanks you guys all for coming and filling up the beautiful colored chairs. So I'm going to play a little slideshow first, and then I'll go right into the presentation, and then we'll do question and answers at the end. If anyone has a burning question while I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand. What am I going to teach people from Google? Then I started thinking about it. And I think, I'm a professional photographer. But I want you to understand that there is not a disconnect between you and I. What I mean by that is every single photograph that you just saw was a self-created project. It was not a job. It was not a client. I may have sold the images later. They may have gotten published or won awards. But they are all things that I went out, I had an idea, and I just pursued it. And I thought about photography. What is photography really about? If you want to build a body of work, it's about creating your own opportunities. And that's true whether you're an amateur, an enthusiast, a professional. It's across the board. So I thought, that's something I want to discuss. That's something I want to share, is how important it is to be, if you will, an opportunist. So your daughter will not graduate high school. That's what my parents were told when I was in 5th grade. When I was in 5th grade, when those multiple choice tests that have the A, B, C, D, instead of reading the question and selecting the appropriate answer, I would make drawings. So I wasn't doing very well in 5th grade. So my parents took me to a learning disability place, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And they proceeded to tell my parents that they needed to pull me out of regular school because I would never finish high school. I remember my parents telling me that, and I thought, I don't want to leave my friends. And this was the first time I can remember someone putting a serious limitation on me. And I wasn't going to buy it. So, not only did I finish high school, but I graduated top of my class at Cal Poly, and I think I got like 2 Bs. Point of the story is that it's interesting how in life people will put limitations on you. In photography, it's the same way. It's really hard to be professional. It's really hard to do this. It's really hard to do that. Don't try. And I found that don't listen to those people. Because the greatest limitations are really self-imposed and by listening to others that might not have your best interest at heart. So, definition of opportunity. A favorable juncture or circumstances, a good chance for advancement or progress. All of these, opportunity is a great word, right? When you think of opportunity, you think, oh, yeah, opportunity, it's good. So wouldn't you think the direct correlation that an opportunist would have an equally positive connotation? One who takes advantage of opportunity to achieve end with no regards to principles or consequences is the definition of an opportunist. Thesaurus of this, look at this. The synonyms. Conniving, cunning, deceitful, devious, bully, cheat, delinquent. My absolute favorite, devil. And I'm thinking, I've been calling myself an opportunist for years now. That's horrible. And I started thinking, how can 2 words with the same origin have such opposite meanings? How can one be so negative and so positive? And then I realized what it was. People are jealous. When you see people out there creating their own opportunities, excelling, succeeding, a lot of people get pissed off. They say they cheat. They say they're whatever it is that they say. Point of the story is that there's a sort of belief in our culture that you shouldn't get to where you are by creating your own opportunities and, in a way, going on the fast track. You need to work hard. Work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard. We hear that all the time in our culture. It's so prevalent. And yes, there's the work hard, work smart sort of thing. And I think, yes, of course you have to work hard, but you should work smart, equally smart or more smart. This is my absolute favorite phrase that I hear. You are so lucky. Do you guys get that ever? You work at Google, you're so lucky. And I think to myself, okay, yeah, I'm sure luck had its points in this whole thing. But really, am I here today because I'm lucky? Or because I wanted to be here and I worked hard for it and I worked smart and I created my own opportunities? There is no scarcity of opportunity to make a living at what you love. There's only scarcity of resolve to make it happen. This is by Wayne Dyer. And I really, really believe this. So I'm going to share with you guys a couple stories. And this is really applicable. A lot of them will correlate. Actually, I just realized there was a couple photos from an assignment in the slideshow, but most of them were. But point of the story is whether you're doing a commercial shoot or a personal project, it's really relevant to everyone. I want to emphasize that again. So I got hired to do this shoot by John Deere, and they decided that there was not going to be an art director, a team. They forwent the advertising agency completely and brought me on as the only person in charge of the shoot. So I arrived, and they, of course, had set up models for me and at least kind of got something there for when I arrived. I showed up, and do not trust people that are not photographers or not ad agencies to get you models, or locations for that matter. So I got there and realized that early on, that what they had given me was not, the content they gave me was not going to allow me to produce work that I felt proud of. So we start at 4 a.m., I show up, models aren't good, locations aren't good, long shoot day, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're finishing. And I'm thinking 12 hours later, I do not like any of these images. The easy out would be, you know what, they set it up. They just chose not to hire an ad agency, and here we are today. But that's not me. So we're driving away, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do? And I turn to my assistant, and I say, we're just getting started. We need to find something else. So the campaign was, just like Harley Davidson, John Deere wanted to make it more about lifestyle than product. And that's why they just brought me in and they didn't bring in an advertising team, is they really wanted to get like the real life of John Deere. So I figured I'm going to drive around and I'm going to find people that use John Deere. So that's what I did. And I found this man, and that's his home. And I walked up to his door, because I saw he had John Deere equipment everywhere. And I thought this would be perfect. So I walked up to his door, knocked on it, and I said, hey, I'm doing this assignment for John Deere. Is there any way that I could shoot you this afternoon when the light gets nice? Oh, okay, sure. All right, do you have any family members? Classic Mennonites. Lots of family. And it was interesting because I asked him if he had family members. He said yes. I said, can you please, have them all come back? And this is just some random girl. He doesn't know me from anyone. Walking to his door saying, can you bring your family over so we can do a photo shoot? I show up and they're all, dressed in their best, right? And they're so excited to be in this photo shoot. So I photographed their family, and this was so exhilarating. I knew when I was getting it, this is what it was like. This is what John Deere life is like. So the results from this were that these were actually the images that they chose to use. And these images secured me they're still my client today. Had I not gone out and done this, there's no way the other images would have passed. They would have gone back to the theory of having an ad agency and doing it that way. So the lesson behind it is really not being limited by your resources. All right, so I love to travel. Who out there likes travel photography? A lot, yeah, that's a popular one. That's how I got started, just so you guys know. Just would go on trips and take my camera and take a bunch of photos. And during one of these excursions, I was in Vietnam, and I had this whole plan. I had found out about this little village at the top of this mountain, and thought, oh, this is going to be such a great experience. I'd heard of a couple people going to it before, so it was a little bit known, but not, it was still, there wasn't a ton of Westerners up there, and I thought, wow, what an authentic, cool thing. I'm going to pack a backpack, I'm going to hike up there, spend the night, and photograph this village. Very, very, very excited. So I'm walking along with my little backpack, all happy, going to the place, and I come along this most beautiful girl. I think, oh, I'm just gonna follow this girl. So I'm following her, thinking she's gonna walk up to the village I'm going to, and I'll get some photographs of her along the way, and it's gonna be fantastic. So we're walking along, and at the base of the mountain becomes a split. Whoa. At the base of the mountain becomes a split. And we're going left, right? Except for she goes right. And then there's that moment of plans, girl, plans, girl. So I follow my intuition. And I follow the girl. We walked 4 hours. This is how far she walks home from school. 4 hours. You see her little jelly shoes? We're walking through rice fields with snakes. This is such a cultural, incredible experience to see her life. I'm sorry I didn't have a bigger one, but this is their family. And this is what she walked me and brought me to this home. So much more authentic than a village that people knew about, right? And I spent the night, I stayed with them in their home. Can't speak a word of language, doesn't matter. And this is what I was exposed to. I remember walking home the next day, and it started raining. And I pulled out my trusty poncho, which by the way, I totally recommend when you're shooting, always have a poncho. Pulled out my trusty poncho, put it over my backpack with my camera, walking, and the rain was pouring over me. And I was thinking to myself, this is the most amazing day of my life. This is the most amazing experience. So the lesson from this is don't let plans for possible, keep that in mind, possible future opportunities make you miss the ones right in front of you. It's really easy to have a plan and to be excited about your plan and be blindsided to everything else around you. So if you do have those intuitive hits, photography is all about intuition. If you have an intuitive hit while you are shooting, listen to it. Appalachia. So, I had spent several hours with this family building this beautiful rapport. And you know, I photograph people, that's what it's all about, building a rapport. I had access to their home, to their backyard, their family, their kids. I am working, and I'm just not getting anything. But I'm stubborn. I'm not gonna leave until I get something. And then I look up, and across in the neighbor's yard, I see this girl, and I think, I could be stubborn and I could stay working with this family that I've invested so much, or I'm getting out of here right now and going and photograph this girl. So I went with option B. And I knocked on the door, asked her mom. She hesitantly let me in the house, into the backyard. Hesitantly. She told me I could take one photo. And it wasn't like, okay, sure, I'll take one photo, click, click, click. It was like, you can take one photo and I'm standing right next to you watching me. So she let me slide with 2, but this is what I got. So the phrase, don't beat a dead horse. If you're photographing something and it's just not working, I mean, you guys are at Google, so I imagine you have a lot of drive. And some of you are probably stubborn like I am. Don't allow your drive and stubbornness to miss other things that might be around you. If something's not working photographically, it's okay to let it go and move on to the next opportunity. So, Adobe Lightroom Adventure in Tasmania. This was really exciting. In 2008, Adobe sent 17 of what they say are the world's best photographers to Tasmania to beta test Lightroom 2. So they sent me along, and I was by far the youngest one. I was so nervous. To add insult to injury, and I had a job already preserved, so I had to show up a week later than everyone else. So I have all these icons that have already been there a week, gathering all these wonderful images. I'm competitive, like most people are in their own ways. I get there and I'm freaking out. I have to get results. I have to get images. How am I going to catch up? Totally intimidated. But I'm fired up. The next morning, I'm going to get gold images. It's going to be amazing. The situation, I am a portrait photographer and there are no people in Tasmania. I'm driving around looking for people and they are not there. It is so sparsely populated. Oh, by the way, did I mention all the other iconic photographers were like landscape photographers, adventure photographers, like all the things that's perfect for Tasmania? So what am I gonna do? So I knocked, and I knocked, and I knocked. Can any of you guys guess what I was doing? Come on, somebody? Going door to door, baby. That's what I did. I just started knocking on people's doors and asking them if I could photograph them, because that was the only way I could find people. The interesting thing about it is this actually became a huge advantage. Not only was I able to photograph people, but I was able to photograph them in their own environment. So this is this guy's, he was hilarious. He was like in his 80s, I don't know, his 80s or 90s. But I asked him if he had a wife or like, you know, someone that he lived with. And he's like, oh no, I can't settle down with just one lady. This was the back, so coal mining is really, it actually reminds me a lot of Tasmania, Appalachia, in the sense that there's a lot of areas that there was a lot of coal mining that no longer exists. So you have the people that used to have jobs no longer having jobs. And this was an old train resting in the back. This was a little girl, believe it or not a boy, and that was just in their backyard. This is a great story. So towards the end of the trip, it actually became kind of a joke that I was the one that was going on and knocking on all these doors. And I had a guide, and our last day, he said, let's play a game. And I said, all right, I'm up for a challenge. What do you have for me? He said, I'm gonna find the scariest house and dare you to knock on the door. So I mentioned to you that Tasmania is like Appalachia. It's like the Wild West, like, even though Appalachia's not West, but point being that it's crazy. There's like, do not enter, gun signs, like it's not somewhere, it's like dogs beware, private property, you know, the completely littered with signs. So we pull up to this house and he goes, all right, here we go. And I look at him and I think, oh, all right. And what I'd found is, interesting enough, the weirder the house was, the nicer the people. So I went and knocked on the door, and sure enough, it was this family, and they invited me inside, and I hung out with them, and eventually we went outside, and I asked the kid, who's 4, by the way, Anvil, can you show me your favorite toy? He pulls out a freaking chainsaw. And the thing was, this is a real chainsaw. This is not a toy. It is heavy. And what amazed me most is look at how he's holding it with such ease. This was seriously his favorite toy. So I have to warn you though, if anyone's gonna go out there and do this, it doesn't always turn out so well. Yeah, that's why I don't like photographing in Asian cultures, because there's all dogs everywhere and they come fight at you. Anyway, the result is the images got lots of awards, they were published, I had incredible experiences, and one of the best things was, because I came a week late, I was supposed to be on my own. Everyone else was leaving, but I wanted to stay an additional week past everyone. And I was supposed to be on my own, but Tourism Tasmania actually funded the rest of my trip because they were really interested in the images that I was getting. And they were unique. So a lot of really wonderful things came out of this. So the lesson being, do not be limited by your resources. And do not be limited by apparent resources. And what I mean by that is that it would have been really easy just to say, you know what, there's not a lot of people in Tasmania. I guess I'll just shoot landscape, or I'll shoot devils, or, you know, Tasmanian devils. But instead it was kind of coming to the conclusion that no, I am a portrait photographer. That is what I excel at. How can I make this work? So there's a show out there that's called 9 by Design. Have any of you guys seen it by any chance? It's a design show on the, it was on the Bravo network, now it's on HGTV. It's this family. They're incredible designers. They live in Manhattan. They basically take buildings and completely renovate them. So for example, their last home they created was a sex shop. And they just completely tore it out and renovated and built a $20 million home right in New York. So watching this TV show, and I'm not this type of person, like I don't like fall in love with stars, but there's something about this family that I really, really liked. And I kind of fell in love with this family watching their show. And I kept thinking, how cool would it be to photograph this family? So the situation is, I fall in love with them. I see great potential, not only photographing their family and their kids because I am interested in them, but also they're designers. They do Tyra Banks' house, Trump's house, like they have a lot of contacts. And they love photography, so I think, wow, I could tap into their clientele and become a referral from them. So the only problem is I live 3,000 miles away. I have no contacts. They have no contact information listed. And I don't really have a family portfolio to show them. One would think, good luck, right? But I wrote a pitch letter anyway. I labored over the pitch letter, sent it on a Friday, and honestly had zero expectations. So I sent it to their agent, because that was the only contact I get. Sent it to a New York agent, expecting nothing. Monday morning, I got a call from their agent. And she said, they've gotten a ton of requests. You're the first person that they're going to invite into their home. I mean, they had journalists come in, but they never had a photographer come in and stay with them. I lived with them for 3 days. And these are some of the images that I got. So this is their family bathtub. And this is their 2 twin sons and their baby son. This is their son, Breaker. He's the cool one. This is Breaker and their nanny. So they have, I think, 5 or 6 nannies, because they have 7 kids. So, but their nanny, you can see the relationship. They're really, really part of the family. This is Robert talking, sitting on his desk. There's 2 desks like this in the entire world. One is in the Museum of Modern Art, and the other one's in his bedroom. This is our teenage daughter, Bellamy, and I really wanted to play on, she's 12, and she's entering that really complex age. This is their gym in their basement. Their son's really into basketball. This is their daughter, Tallulah. This is like the view right outside their house. So the point of the story is that, first off, this was one of the most rewarding, fun weekends, or 3 days of my life. I had so much fun. This family is so special, and photographing them was so inspiring. They also invited me back to be recorded on their show. So they're featuring me on their show, which is coming out in June. And now I'm their family photographer. They want me to come to Brazil to photograph them. and I'm building this portfolio. So there's a lot. This is just the beginning too. I know a lot of other amazing things are going to come out of this. So I really wanted to share this to you because I think it's really easy to say something won't work without trying. Because from an outsider, if someone told me the situation that I was going into writing that pitch letter, most people would say that's a waste of your time. So don't dismiss it until you try it. This is another shoot. I did this shoot as a test shoot when I was in New York, and I was really inspired by it. And I came to San Francisco, and I thought, oh, I'd love to do this like old Hollywood San Francisco shoot. I kept waiting for like a client or project, something to come to me. And then I realized that it just wasn't going to come. No one was going to share the vision that I had, and that if I really wanted to do the shoot, I had to do it on my own. So I spent several months putting together a team and finding the venue. And these are just a few of the people that I pulled together. And we created this really inspiring, wonderful shoot. And a lot of times, I have no idea what I'm going to do with the images. And that's okay. If you have an idea, just go for it. So have any of you guys ever been to the Julia Morgan Ballroom in San Francisco? It's magnificent. It's really beautiful. So obviously, I got a lot of satisfaction from the shoot. And it was my first time experience really producing a shoot, and I realized how much work went into it and got a better understanding of the industry through it. And then I also pulled together this team and made a lot of contacts and still work with them today. And the images got published, won awards, and so a lot of great things happened afterwards, but that wasn't my impetus for doing it. My impetus for doing it was because I had an idea and I had a sort of, we go back to intuition. I knew it was something that I needed to do. So the lesson is, if you're passionate about an idea, you're the only one who can really make it happen. Which brings us to personal projects. So I have a show that Ricardo mentioned. It's called Twit Photo. And we interview these exceptional photographers every week. And there's one common thread between all of them, which is great because this common thread connects you, professionals, to you guys, amateurs, enthusiasts, not aspiring pros because you work at Google, but point being, people that love photography. It's all the same. And what every single photographer says is that you have to have personal projects. So these are just a couple of the projects that I've done where it's just been, this is Burning Man. You guys have heard of Burning Man. Has anyone gone to Burning Man? All right, one person. We're connected. So these are just, a few of the images that I've gotten. I've gone there 4 or 5 years. And that's the thing that's great about personal projects. They can last as long or as short as you want them to. So if you're inspired by something, you just keep going back. You keep working on it. And then, like I said, you don't plan for these things, but things come out of it later. Whether it's getting on magazines, winning awards. Here's a little exhibit that I did. So if anyone wants to know what Burning Man's like, this gives you a kind of a brief. Yeah, that's what it's like. It's kind of crazy. But we did a full-on exhibit with metal prints. Bay Photo sponsored it. And it was a daytime and a nighttime exhibit. Does anyone want to go? It's pretty cool. Photographically, actually, that's the reason I went, is I wanted to photograph it. It's very cool for taking photographs. There's a lot of interesting art projects, people, tons of stuff to photograph. So the lesson is every great photographer will explore their passions through personal projects. All right, so we've talked a lot about the importance of creating your own opportunities and doing work that you love and following your intuition. So what do you guys think is the #1 reason that people don't pursue their passion and just make it happen? Come on, anyone? Time, money.
They think more than just act.
What?
They think more than act.
They think more than act. That's a good one. Big talker, no action. Fear. 4 people said it at once. You guys are all awesome. Everything you guys just said is totally right, but it all leads to fear. It all leads to fear. Money. I started doing travel photography when I was in college. I had to go to Asia because that was the only place I could afford. You know, every single thing I hear, it all comes back to fear. What is the definition of fear? It is a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, pain, etc., where the threat is real or imagined. I think the key here is the threat is real or imagined. We all know that fear is good, right? If the threat is real, you need to react. Unfortunately, emotionally, fear is not real. It is imagined, so it becomes real to you. I actually, interestingly enough, I see fear as often as a sign of something that I need to do. If I get that feeling like, oh, I don't want to do this, and I start making excuses. I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have this or that. It all comes back to fear. So here's a couple things where I think fear, overcoming your fear can help you as a photographer. So number 1, don't be afraid to make fun of yourself or laugh at yourself. If you photograph people in particular, if you're really serious looking through the camera, then they're going to be a little intimidated. If you're loose and you're having fun and you're engaged, and I'm not saying you have to be different than who you are as a human being, but what I am saying is don't be too uptight. Especially when you're working with children. Allow yourself to come to their level. Allow yourself to act like an idiot. Being an exceptional artist and playing safe don't coexist. If you're gonna really excel at something, you can't do it by playing safe. So I want to tell you guys a little story about Connor, who's 1.5 years old. I met him at Burning Man. I photographed him in front of his grandfather's trailer. When it's time to process the photos, I wanted to do something kind of complex and kind of dark. I wanted to do something that was different, but it was risky. And when I was done with this image, I did not want to share it with his father. I did not minimize the dark circles under his eyes. I accentuated them. I did not minimize the dirt and the dust all over him. I pulled it out. And this image at the exhibit I did was the most controversial image there. Half the people looked at it and thought, this was the most conversation. This actually promoted the most conversation as well. Half the people looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, that's so cool. This kid is with Burning Man, he's dirty. This is what kids are supposed to be like. And then the other half of people are, oh, you shouldn't really bring kids to Burning Man. It's not good for him to breathe in this alkaline dust. You know, so it really created a lot of conversation. And I was very, very scared for his father to see this image. Interestingly enough, he loves it. He called me, he wants prints, he wants the file, he wants to do this, that, the other. He's so excited. This is the best photograph he's ever seen of his kid. Tallulah, she's the daughter of the Novogratz family in New York that I photographed, that I talked about, that have the show. Tallulah is 12. You know what it's like when you're 12. You're going through all these changes and you're figuring out who you are. She's twins with Bellamy, who I showed you in the slideshow. They're as opposite as can be. So when it was time to photograph Tallulah, I was trying to figure out, you know, who she is as a person. She's very complex. She's very smart. She's got a kind of a dark side. How am I going to show this in her image, in this image? So I put together this image and I photographed it, I processed it, and I was once again really scared to share the image with the family. They loved it because that's their daughter. So don't make judgments on what you think people will think. Don't play it safe when you have no idea what others' perceptions are. You're making decisions on your own perception, which is not real and which is not right. So fear is a little dark room where negatives are developed. And that's the one thing I really want you guys to walk away with. When it comes to your photography, don't forget this lesson. Yes? So his question was, most of my portraits are done outdoors, and do I control the light at all, or do I shoot with natural light? I started off exclusively shooting with natural light. So, and now I will travel with a reflector, and I recommend California Sunbounce. They make beautiful reflectors. You do not need to carry around huge equipment while you're shooting in these remote locations. You can, and I do sometimes because I see value to it, but you can do a lot with a reflector. The other thing is, don't be afraid. It's good to use shade, so you can shoot at any time of the day. But if you have a reflector, well, you'll at least get pop and contrast and color. And the main thing is you really want to make sure that their eyes are not dark sockets. So if you stick someone in the shade and don't use any reflectors, a lot of times their eyes will just kind of like go black and lifeless. You really want to avoid that. So if you are using a reflector, make sure you're at least getting a little, we call it a ping in the eye. Does that help? Yeah.
I don't seem to be a big fan of smiling faces.
Oh, great question. So he says I'm not a huge fan of smiling faces. And actually, that's a great observation. The first thing I tell people when I shoot them is do not smile. I don't want you to smile. If I make you laugh, then laugh. If you're feeling like smiling, then naturally smile, because I'm doing something silly, but I'm controlling them in a sense. I'm telling them what to feel. So if I act crazy, silly, I want them to laugh. It will be real. It will be authentic. But the main point of the story is I don't want people doing any expressions that are not real. So I guess the moral of the story is that I don't like people smiling. Yes?
How do you do focusing?
How do I do focusing? So that's actually a really good question. I had some other tips, but we didn't have time to get through them. One thing, I use autofocus for everything. And one thing I learned is the center point, especially if you're using really fast lenses like the 85-1.2, the center point is the best focus point. It's the fastest one. So if you're ever having a problem focusing your lens, by using, you can like change, if you have a side point, put it to the center. Because that's the only way I can focus with 85. Does that answer?
Yeah, I had the same problem with an 85.
Yeah, it's the only way to do it is I'll get it focused on the center point and then I'll recompose. Because my subject's never in the center, very, very rarely in the center. So it's kind of like a dance, you focus, compose, but that's the only way that works with the really fast lenses, like the 85, or actually the slow lenses, if you will. Yeah.
But there is curvature of field, and if you do that, you'll be off focus by the time you compose.
Yeah, so he had just had a great observation. He says there's curvature of field, and if you do that, by the time, it's not going to be optimal. When shooting portraits, it's so negligible that it really doesn't matter for me. If I was shooting something like architecture that was going to be blown up to a huge billboard, then I would be more concerned about that, and I would manually focus at that time. So if your goal is to have like the sharpest focus and you're shooting something you want great depth of field, and you have the time to manually focus, then manually focus. But with people, they're moving, I'm not going to do anything huge with the files. I don't think it really matters so much. That's a good observation. Yeah. Oh, sorry, he was holding for a while. Yeah.
Do you get model releases for your portraits, including the ones that you take outside like you're doing?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. He asked if I get model releases, and this, I can't even tell you how important it is to get model releases. When I first started my career, I was in college, I was just traveling around taking photos, and I wasn't getting model releases because I figured what I'm not doing with these, and I'm just building a portfolio. And it's really easy to do this, and this goes back to fear, because it sucks getting a model release, doesn't it? It's not fun. So I made an excuse and didn't get them. And then Adobe asked me, and then I actually started getting recognition for my work, and Adobe wanted to do something with my images, and I had no images because none of them had model releases. So the moral of the story is I think it's very, very, very important to get releases. I think also you do not need to use intimidating language. So like the Getty releases, and a lot of them have like this crazy legal language. It's actually legally better to have a simple release that just says Catherine Hall can use, and I'm coming out with a model release app, by the way. It's been submitted to the Apple Store, but it's called Top Model Release. And actually using a device even makes it less intimidating somehow, and it's really, really easy to get model releases that way and organize them. But you can create custom releases, and my release is literally Catherine Hall photographed me on May 16th, 2012. She has permission to use the images in any purpose in any form, period. Versus like, she can distort my face and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Because you don't really, in a lot of ways it makes it actually less legal when you have those really convoluted long releases. Yeah. Yeah, he's asking about models asking for consideration and asking for money, asking for, and I think that really depends on the individual. When I photograph people, I'm giving a lot too. There's a lot, it's kind of like we're building a relationship and they're as invested as I am. When I'm going into these people's homes, I'm giving them prints. So if you're traveling a lot, I recommend carrying a Polaroid so you can give someone the print automatically, because otherwise you have to send it and it takes long and you don't want to do it. But if you can give them something right away, that's great. But what I found is as soon as you start negotiating money, especially before you start shooting, then it sort of taints the relationship. Because then all of a sudden, it's not about an experience anymore. It's about them being hired for a job. However, in the past, what I have done, if I've seen someone being really needy or family being needy, I've gone through the whole thing with no expectation of money, and then at the end given them something as like a token of my appreciation. But I've had people ask me for money right out of the gate, and I'll actually avoid photographing those people because I know that their intention's not pure. And usually those people will be the ones that are like, all right, you get one shot. And then you want to take more and they want more money, and it's just not a very good experience for anyone. And the photographs don't feel authentic and real. So he's asking basically how often, what proportion do I just feel the images can be kept natural, or do I need to go in and retouch? I think this is very, very subjective, and I like images on both extremes from other photographers. For me personally, I like bringing out, I'm trying to tell a story with every single image. So I use Photoshop as a tool to illustrate that message of that story. So for example, the boy with the dust all over him. If I hadn't retouched the dust to really come out, it would feel a little flat. So I wanted to accentuate, yes, he was dirty, he was at Burning Man, it was crazy, it was hot, it was, so I want that story, and I use the retouching as a way of sort of making sure that message is given to the viewer easily.
I guess my question was, do you actually see them the way they...
Oh, do I see them retouched, or do I see them...
Yeah, when you take the picture, do you see them...
That's a really, really great question. He's asking if I see it in advance or if it's something I do during post, come up with the how... I definitely do not see it retouched. Some people will. They will shoot it knowing how it's going to end up. For me, I'm very organic with the way I shoot, and I'm just thinking about getting the best I can in camera, and that's my focus is on that. So the lighting, the composition, all these different factors, and then when I pull in the image, I think, all right, that's when the second tier of the creative process starts, is where do I want to take this with the retouching?
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming out today. And
thank you guys
Catherine.
so much.